So I'd say, broadly speaking, when you deconstruct what advanced TV is, it generally will fall into two buckets, industry terms. One is data-driven linear, and the other is addressable. Now, as a result of COVID, when sports marketing or sports programming essentially shut down across the globe, um, there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines, ready to be activated. Historically, has been activated across events like March Madness, the NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball getting underway, et cetera. Now, um, the role that we've tried to play with COVID with our clients across both WarnerMedia and Xandr, it's been a very similar approach. Generally, what we're hearing from marketers is at this moment in time, they're looking for fewer, better, larger enterprise grade partners. We happen to be ones that also bring 5G connectivity to the equation, the Internet of Things to the equation, et cetera. But sort of going back to basics, which is kind of what's happening during this pandemic. There's a couple of things that we've really tried to focus our energies on. Most importantly, the focus has been on being good, helpful, empathetic partners to the advertising community. And so when you look at the physical sort of tactical execution related types things that we've done, generally they fall into a couple of buckets. We've as studios have gone dark across the globe. So other than news organizations sort of filming live, generally studios and creative shops have shut down. We've heard from marketers that they need our help with creating new messages that get broadcast on television and via digital. We've tried to use our muscle in the creative production space to really help our advertising clients. The second is that sports money that was sitting on the sideline. We've been trying to help marketers find places to place that money. So even though sports programming or the context of sports is out of the picture, just given the large, broad footprint that WarnerMedia and Xandr have together, and the sort of science-based underpinnings of us as companies, we've been successfully finding appropriate audiences for those clients, so that money doesn't sit idle by the wayside. And then third, and probably as important as those other points, the tonality, given where we are as a nation right now, with all that's going on between the race conversation, the global pandemic with COVID, all of that combined together, the tonality and the sensitivity with which we have to get these messages across, we've not ever been at a moment in time like this. So, really what we're trying to focus on is helping our clients sort of survive through the crisis that we're in right now, so that eventually they can get to a point where they're going to thrive. And so really, again, the bow that I'll put on it is really at our core trying to be empathetic, understanding, helpful partners that eventually will help clients survive the crisis, and then in the future thrive based on the relationships that are being set now.
Tell us about data, the utility of data for both planning and also an understanding performance.
Sure, that's a big hairy topic, and I guess given that it's 2020, along with data, I have to also combine sort of responsible use of that data. So both WarnerMedia and AT&T, as well as Xandr, have all been synonymous with consumer choice, consumer trust for at least for the AT&T and WarnerMedia side for 100+ years. The environment, as it relates to data, is highly, highly fragmented, as you know. So if you were to watch CNN today, and you asked me, hey, how many different ways are there for me to watch CNN today? In addition to watching via linear, you're talking about close to 70 different endpoints just for CNN. Now, if you ask me, hey, on a Roku device, how many different ways are there? You're talking about probably a half dozen ways just on Roku alone. All of this, what it leads to is a very high degree of fragmentation in terms of how the consumer is consuming the content, not just how consumers consuming it, but in addition, how we as the programmer are able to convert that data for use by the marketer ultimately, right? So in environments, specific connected TV environments that are sort of high growth, data rights are limited. In other environments, data rights are pretty broad. All of this, under the blanket of CCPA and GDPR compliance on a global level. So I'd say, on the linear side, if we were to chunk this up into what happens with linear, what happens with digital, and then what happens in a converged world, let's just take it that way. So on the linear side, um, I'd say initiatives like Project OR, where we've been a founding member, those initiatives are going to continue to be supremely important to us. The notion of a unified standardized way of transacting on things like addressable enablement across the direct TV footprint, and also sort of more broadly across other MVPDs. Key area of focus for us, that there's just gobs of data that comes off of that stuff that we try and make usable. On the digital side, the focus has been on dealing with the death of the cookie. And so, how do we handle mobile ad IDs, the diminishing use of the cookie for marketing purposes, and then eventually getting to this converged world, which is the third state, which is the notion of a unified identity graph or identity spine that ties all of these things together. So you as a consumer, going back to that CNN example, when you're commuting, when we eventually get back to commuting to work every day, when you're commuting in on the train, generally you're going to open up your mobile browser and you might consume CNN content that way. You might get to your desk at work, open up your laptop or your desktop, and you're going to be on the mobile website. On your way home, you'll go back to either app or mobile web, and then when you finally get home, you're going to lean back and you're going to be watching CNN content through some sort of connected TV device, right? So in that instance, how do we know that it's, number one, that it's you? And then because we know that it's you, how do we personalize the content, personalize the advertising to you, so that you're not bombarded with the same repeating ad over and over, that there's, and the experience is actually a joyful one, not one that's an intrusive one, all of which, has the underpinnings of the identity graph. But again, data and responsible use of data, those terms sort of go together from this point forward. So I'd say on linear addressable, there's a few different sort of marketplaces that are being formed. On the Xandr side, the focus has been on something called NAC, the National Addressable Consortium. It's comprised of Altice and Frontier and DirecTV inventory. That's sort of one marketplace. There's another marketplace that's being formed with Ampersand that now has Verizon inventory. So there's a handful of these marketplaces that, that as marketers are trying to get access to addressable inventory. Longer term, remains to be seen sort of whether there ends up being one mega marketplace of all addressable inventory, or if there's these pockets that continue. Regardless, I think, again, initiatives like Project OR, we're a founding member, those are going to be really important regardless of how many different marketplaces there are, and also whether transacting happens one-to-one or in an automated fashion. We're prepared to sort of handle both the one-to-one, but then also the platform type execution through acquisitions that Xandr has made, companies like Clipped, for example.